right. Can y'all hear me okay? Charlotte?
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. This is our second conversation.
It is. Thank you for
Although we were
having me.
saying earlier, we actually haven't met in person until
No, we've
now,
always done it virtually.
even though we've talked a lot. All right.
It's lovely to be in a sweaty room with you.
I know. It's perfect. I will say, I have referenced, so you obviously were on our CMO podcast, Scratch, a while ago? A couple of years ago?
Yeah. Well, I've judged this because I was pregnant with my baby, so that is definitely a while ago. She's now 18 months, so.
I will say, I still reference, maybe not every week, but like a couple times a month, I still reference our conversation. So I got
nice.
a lot out of it. Hopefully people will get something out of it today. Okay, so before we get into the conversation about you and Bloom and Wild, the icebreaker question that we ask every guest when we're doing an interview like this, can you tell us about a challenger brand? I see you brought props.
I have brought props.
That you're particularly passionate about right now. And
Yeah,
why.
okay, so full disclosure, this is my mate's brand, but I wouldn't publicize a brand I thought was rubbish. It's called Belly Dance. It's a kefir soda. The reason I think it's a great example for this like challenger brand question is kefir soda, if you think about it, kefir drinks are like in little white bottles and they're yogurty and gross. And this is actually delicious, and it's really beautifully designed, it's fun, and I just love it, and we're loving it in our office. So if you have a drinks fridge in your office, get some of this. It's really a great addition to your afternoon snacking, kind of cooling down, especially in this heat.
Perfect. All right, so let's get into the conversation. So the way that we decided to structure this is I think probably most people are familiar with Bloom and Wild at this point, but obviously what the business was known for and kind of the category that you challenged in many ways created with letterbox flowers is one thing, but where you are now and definitely where you're going is going to be something else entirely. And I think the conversation with you is really interesting because I'm interviewing a few challenger brands here, but you all are at that stage where you've successfully challenged and changed the category, and so now how do you get to the next level while kind of staying true to the principles and practices that helped you get to the first level? So we're going to talk about the key principles and practices that drove your, let's call it stage one success, what's changing now that you're going into stage two, and then something that I know you're passionate about is how you stay focused on the customer through all of those changes. So starting with stage one, can you give us, maybe start with kind of like a brief overview of like the Cliff Notes version of stage one of Bloom and Wild, and then what drove that success from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, sure. So I think for those of you who don't know us, we started out as a flower delivery brand, and really there were just no loved brands in that space, so everyone's favorite flower delivery brand was Google. And the brands that did exist were didn't have a really strong digital experience. Even the design of the flowers wasn't really what you wanted to send in this day and age, and maybe that was kind of okay pre-WhatsApp, pre-Instagram, but actually after that, when you're thinking about, it's a bit like, the A to Z was good when we didn't have Google Maps, but like after that, everybody needs to up their game. So I feel like that was really important that we brought a fresh approach to that, and a brand that was really thoughtfully put together as well. So I think, as I said at the beginning, there were no loved brands. So really having a brand that tried to reflect its customer and think about, well, what do they value? They value beautiful design. They value a really slick digital experience. They want amazing customer service, because the interactions that we're kind of facilitating are actually really emotional and important for people. You don't send flowers, flippantly. You send it to mean something. The most obvious thing that I say I actually wasn't involved in this very early phase, so my boss did, was invent letterbox flowers. And that's the most obvious innovation that we brought to the category. And what's interesting about that is there are a few kind of things that did. So by sending our flowers in bud, and then they bloom over a few days, the quality is amazing, so people loved that. It also means that people were sending WhatsApp to each other over like a couple of weeks, even 3 weeks, being like, oh, my flowers look amazing. Oh, they're even more beautiful. They're still going. So when you think about the fact that we're trying to facilitate that connection between people, that was really interesting. The other thing it did was make flower gifting have way more occasions and recipients, because if you had to be in and it was this big flashy gesture, you're maybe not going to do that if your friend's just having a bad week. But with letterbox flowers, actually it shifted the whole behavior around the way that people were buying and flowers, what they were sending them for, and not having to be in meant that it could be a smaller gesture. So that was really important at the beginning. But I think I would say that the key things is kind of the design, both in terms of physical product, the brand, the digital experience, having amazing customer experience, and this kind of letterbox invention.
There's something else that I remember from our first conversation when you were on the podcast, where there was a very intentional focus on kind of turning a single customer into a repeat customer,
Yeah.
but also turning them into an advocate. Is that something
Yeah.
you can unpack a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think about 80% of our business is for repeats.
Yeah, that's the stat I remember. That's
Yeah,
impressive.
exactly. So it's repeat customers. So I think that is a testament to the quality of experience that we provide, that people want to keep coming back. And not just keep coming back, but keep trusting us with really important, meaningful occasions and like messages that they're trying to send.
Was there I mean, obviously there was. Sorry, that was a stupid way into the question. Who was kind of like the category incumbent? Because now,
Yeah.
in many ways, I know we're going to talk about stage 2. I think people would think of you, hopefully
Yeah.
first, when they think of kind of sending
Yeah.
flowers. I know that my household does. Who was the category incumbent, and how did they kind of like leave a gap for you all
Yeah.
to come in and do this?
Well, I don't really like to bash other brands, but I suppose that you would probably think about Interflora being the category
Right.
incumbent that was there, which has a different model. And I think, as I said at the beginning, I think the gap was really this digital experience, and then by inventing a whole new product in the flower delivery space, it wasn't that necessarily that they left a gap. It was something that hadn't really been thought of before, and so we were able to disrupt in that way.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's shift gears a little bit and start to talk about stage 2. And maybe before we do that, because again, I think a lot of people here have heard of Bloom and Wild, but maybe they don't know everything about kind of the stage and the state of the business right now. So what is the state of the union when it comes to Bloom and Wild in 2025?
So we are Europe's leading flower delivery company. We are in 8 markets. There are about 350 of us working across the group. We have 3 brands, in fact. So you guys probably know Bloom and Wild, but if you were in the Netherlands or Belgium, you would know Bloemon. And in France, we have a brand called Bergamote. So it's become much bigger than the one small brand, but we try and keep that ethos in everything that we do. And we'll kind of come on and talk about focus on the customer, but that's why that's so important, is that to us, as we scale, we don't ever want to lose that focus. And we were just talking about it this morning in our exec meeting. How do we make sure that we're still getting to those individual customer pain points that might not come through our theming in some of the tools that we use to aggregate them, but are still really important and might be leading signals. So we'll come back to that.
So there are certainly some things that are changing for the better, or that you need to change in order to get to this next level. The way that you focus on the customer, understand their needs, deliver on them is going to be different for where you are now than where it was in stage 1. But there are also going to be some things that need to kind of stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So what are before we talk about what's changed, what are some of the consistencies that you're making sure stay true from stage 1 to stage 2?
Such a great point, because I think as you scale, especially if you're a challenger brand, you've had probably really quite tight criteria around how you do things, or values, or drivers. So and it's so important that you have those in mind as you scale. So for us, it's always been about quality, so amazing quality, amazing service, and an amazing experience for both our senders and recipients. So actually, one of the things that people mention to me often is the unboxing experience, and how that is really, I can see some nodding, that's lovely, how that is really meaningful and differentiated from other brands, and we put a lot of thought into that. We think about where should the card be, and what should you see first, and where does this message go, and so we really spend a lot of time thinking about that. So that whole obsession with the customer experience, and remembering that we have 2 customers, we have our senders, we have our recipients, and thinking about our design credentials. I think that's always set us apart, both in terms of our products and our branding, and this quality and curation of products as well, that people will trust us they know that if it's come from Bloom and Wild, it's going to be good.
So one of the things I think it's always interesting to ask and get into is the whole kind of, is marketing more of a science, or is it more of an art?
Mm-hmm.
And I know from our first conversation, but also from our prep call for this, the role of marketing as kind of a research and development function to understand the customer needs is really important. When you talk about kind of what the customer is looking for in terms of the letters that you include, or whatever that specific thing is, if you think about kind of that cliche expression of Henry Ford, if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. How much of the way that you think about research and development to find these improvements and iterations around what you do how much of it comes from like, well, the customer is saying this, so we should give it to them, versus we need to be leading them, and we need to be leading the category if we want to stay ahead?
I feel like you've been in my exec meeting this morning. We literally had this conversation. So a good example is we have now launched into other gifting categories. So we are on a mission to be a gifting destination more broadly, not just about flowers. So if you haven't seen them yet, check them out. But when we're thinking about that, that didn't come from a customer saying to us, I would love it if Bloom and Wild did other gifts like hampers and brownies and smaller gift sets. We as a company felt like we had the right as a brand to play in that space. We built up that right to play there, built up trust in our platform and our brand, and we felt that this was a space we could enter into. Where we used our customer insight, and we're like really hot on that, was asking them, okay, how should we do that? What kinds of things would you be interested in? What kinds of price points? Which brands do you like? And that was really informative at the beginning. And then I think as you launch, you then merge from seeing kind of what customers tell you they want to seeing what they actually buy, and that has like given us another step on, and so we've been really able to hone in on, okay, actually, people seem to really value the fresh products that we can do, so like food and drink hampers, brownies, that kind of thing, and the like very curated gift sets. So one of our best-selling gift sets is like a hug in a box, and people love that. It's because we've really thought about what that ritual is and what it's saying. So there's a mixture, I think, all the time of what we think's right for us as a brand and a business, and then what customers are telling us or showing us through their behavior, and we tweak things as we go along based on that.
So there's a couple things that I want to double click on from our prep call when you were talking about kind of where the business is at right now and some of the success stories that you've had and some of the things that have changed as you've gotten to the stage 2. One is this conversation around a purchase as a novelty or a one-off occurrence to more of a ritual, which I think a lot of people listening to this would be interested in kind of learning your tips and tricks for. Loyalty in general, you have 1 million members in your loyalty program now. And then, of course, AI in research and insights. And I thought it was really interesting how you were talking about how you've brought tech into the R&D function of your team. So let's start with a novelty to ritual. Can you unpack that for us? What does it mean at Bloom and Wild? How are you going about converting people from a one-off purchase to a ritual?
Yeah, I think we're talking about that because we're talking about how do you go from being this like challenger in a category, creating letterbox flowers, which was sticky to people. When we launched 13 years ago, that was like, wow, this is really new. To then being a brand that can be there for people again and again. And actually, I always talk about it with my team is like, how can we be the most useful we can possibly be to our customers? And so that framing has really kind of been behind the expansion into other gifting categories, which is growing like 100% a year. And we are, I'm trying to remember it was a very long question. What was the first bit?
There was the novelty ritual, the loyalty
exactly,
piece.
Ritual, loyalty, there we go. That's where I was going. Forgive me, I'm back from Glastonbury like last night. So the loyalty program is part of that, like how can we be useful? So if, we're trying to obviously drive frequency, but the way we want to do that is by having this loyalty program that's super easy to become part of. It's super easy for you then to build points, redeem your vouchers, which is, again, really useful to customers because we're making this kind of, we know that our customers who are largely women have like this big mental load. One of the like delightful female mental loads is, oh my God, we've got to buy all the gifts amongst everything else that we do. So actually having something that makes that easy, we have our occasion reminders, we have our loyalty program so that this is, you can save money on it, but also it's super easy, your addresses are all synced, all of that. That all means that kind of burden for gifting becomes more easy to people, which then increases your brand love because they're like, well, I love them because they make it easy, but it's actually also really good. And I think sometimes in gifting, the insight that we have from our customers is they don't want it to be like so easy that it feels like they haven't made an effort. So they need an element of choice. So we try and give them, customization options around what they can add and their card and what that looks like and what they want to write and all of those things because they want to put their own meaning into it. But underneath it all, we're trying to make it as slick as possible for people. I think you asked about how we continue to keep research going as we expand. I was thinking about this. We have a research team of 3, and some businesses that will be loads. For many businesses, that's hardly any at all. And we have like a lot going on all the time. As I mentioned, 3 brands, 8 markets. So there's a lot of insight that we want to get to, but we can't expand the team. So we're using AI a lot there to increase their output. So things like writing research summaries for them. Once there's a research summary written, okay, go and find me a clip from this video of this customer's conversation that supports that insight that we can share with the team. We're also in the process of automating all of our customer tracking using AI. Sorry, not customer tracking, competitor tracking using AI. So it will just draw in like, okay, they've changed their prices. This is the messaging they're using in emails. Like really, really useful stuff. So we're trying to use that to increase our richness of like the data set that we have, whilst we try and do all these new things. And we haven't talked about international, for example. Like, we're now in Germany and other countries, and actually the way they think about flowers is totally different from in the UK, and we need to understand that and flex our proposition. And the research team is absolutely integral to that. So making sure that they are as scaled up as possible is really important.
So I'm curious when it comes to the tech itself, AI, right? I think everybody probably feels like they're just overwhelmed with the rate of change and how many solutions are out there or claimed solutions are out there. How do you kind of stay on top of all that? Or how do you, I'm thinking back to some of the research that we did. We put out this documentary around the future of the CMO role, which you know, and basically the key findings were CMOs need to act as board members first and marketeers second. They need to own and deliver commercial results, but they need to find ways to turn data and technology, including AI, into a competitive advantage for their team and their business. How do you go about turning AI into a competitive advantage for your team and your business, knowing there's just so much stuff out there and you're a team of 3 when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's not just in research that we're using AI. So my creative team are using it a lot. We've seen some amazing use cases recently. I'm seeing we've got 2 minutes, so I don't have time to go into all of them. But I think the main thing I would say here is that it needs to be a cultural piece. So we have like an AI adoption team in the business, which has people from various different teams who are all helping to drive that. And so they're thinking, okay, well, my team would like it for this use case. Can I help them find a tool for that? So it needs to be, you need to put it into the hands of the team and give them time and money to experiment. I'm not talking very much money. We're giving people like, if you want 50 quid a month to experiment with a new tool, cool, you can have that for 3 months. And give them ways to, I'm never going to be able to tell my creative director like how she should use AI in her team. Like, she needs to be empowered to go and do that and come back and say, okay, these are the most impactful use cases, and no, I'm not going to explore that because it actually wouldn't save us that much time. But I think it needs to be a whole business cultural, you need to think about it as like a cultural change piece, I think. Otherwise, it'll stay too small scale.
This is reminding me why our conversation from 2 years ago has stuck in my head so much. And I mean, there's so many takeaways for me, hopefully the audience, so many things that are super impressive about how you built the Bloom Wild brand. But the thing that comes to mind for me is, forget who it was, we had a CMO on our podcast who said, part of the role and part of the most important role for CMOs is to make the organizations that they work for more customer-centric. And actually, I think it's interesting how many of the conversations that we have, how much of what we focus on in conferences like this is not about that. It's kind of about what happens after you start with the insight. But you, I think, more than most, really have kind of taken that mantle internally at Bloom and Wild. It sounds like a huge part of kind of what you're doing for the organization.
Yeah, but also knowing who you are as a brand. And I think like we wouldn't be able to expand into gifting, and that was really important that I set that direction with the team, is like, this is how we're going to expand into gifting. We're not just going to like add in like, milk tray chocolates, no offense to milk tray chocolates, but it's not right for our brand and our customer. So you've really got to know who you are and what you stand for and what your customers value about you before you go and do other things.
All right. Wrap up question. What's the one thing people should do differently after listening to this conversation?
I think that's it. Just know who you are. If you're a challenger brand, you might start with some big innovation, and actually those aren't necessarily repeatable. But if you know who you are, what the drivers were of that, the values behind it, then you can apply that to different things, like different categories or different parts of the business, like your sustainability strategy or approach. So I think there are other ways that you can take that energy and channel it into a different part of the business.
Love it. Charlotte, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much. For some reason, the questions were disabled on the app, but if there's anyone that would really like, we've got time for one question? No? I don't want to rush you. No. But thank you guys both so much.
Cheers.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much.